call me Roy.
Hi, welcome to Roy's Book Reviews. Today I wish to share my thoughts with you on a book entitled Olive Kitteridge. It's written by Elizabeth Strout. This is my copy of it. This book won a Pulitzer Prize for fiction a few years back, which of course is a very impressive feat, and that's why it has this little circle here letting everybody know. This is the first video for Roy's Book Reviews that I am recording in the brand new year of 2025. So I'd like to wish all of you Happy New Year, if you celebrate. If you do not celebrate or acknowledge the calendar, then what can I say but bravo, congratulations, I'm envious. Please drop a line, let me know how you do it, because I'd love to pull that off. But for now, I still have to continue dealing with the calendar. Speaking of which, before the clock struck 12, before the year ran out of 2024, I filmed my final video for that year, and it was a reading of this children's book, Two Cool Cows. It's a fun book to read aloud. So I hope that you check that video out. Even if you come here primarily for reviews that I do of books written for adults, but from time to time I do like to drop a video of a children's book reading. It reminds me of a simpler time in my life, and my daughter was quite young and loved listening to stories. Anyway, without further ado, let me get into Olive Kitteridge. And without bothering to do any more than a superficial skim of the cover copy when I picked it up, going in knowing that Olive Kitteridge had been awarded the Pulitzer Prize for fiction, and so presumably was a very well-written book, I finally got around to reading Elizabeth Strout's heralded prose. I incorrectly assumed that it was a novel, but quickly realized that it is actually a collection of short stories. This almost made me put it aside, since I was in the mood for a single self-contained narrative, rather than a scattershot of tales. But the exquisite quality of writing had already begun to weave its spell on me. Plus, I have a personal checklist of Pulitzer Prize winners that I am working my way through. So I decided to read on in order to check another one off. When I was about 20% in or so, certain observations led me to think that I was going to be underwhelmed and would eventually post a less than glowing review. I suspected that Olive Kitteridge would be one of the weakest Pulitzer Prize winners I ever read, not because it was a short story collection rather than a novel, but because the stories were barely connected to each other. They each take place in the fictional town of Crosby, Maine. Naming the book Crosby seemed like it would have made more sense, because initially, at least, Olive Kitteridge was barely in it. As I continued on, I found that while some of the stories revolved around Olive, in others she was a significant but by no means the central character. And in others, she was barely there at all. A name dropped at some random point who had zero impact on what was going on. How could a character make nothing more than a cameo in a book that's named after her? I was more than a little confused, but there were powerful reasons to continue reading. One of them is that Elizabeth Strout is masterful at establishing a sense of place. Crosby, Maine feels more real than some of the places I've set foot in. Another reason is that she is a maestro of character development. Each character that a particular story/chapter focused on was wonderfully nuanced. I was absorbed by what was going on in each of their lives, even if it was not particularly eventful. all while wondering why some of these people were even in a book called Olive Kitteridge, since removing the sentence or two in the story with her name mentioned would have changed virtually nothing about them. And when Olive was centered in a chapter, it turned out that she is not particularly likable. Her husband Henry, the first chapter's primary character, was a far more pleasant fellow. How was this book going to hold my attention to the end when the kinda main character wasn't someone that I particularly bonded with? I would find out by continuing to read, because the writing was too wonderful to do anything else. As I moved deeper into the book, my attention was gripped with increasing strength. Focus narrowed in on Olive as I went along, on her imperfections, her frailties, her haughtiness, her perseverance, her undeserved pain, her acceptance that pain doesn't need to be deserved to inevitably arrive, her resilience, her disappointment, her bravery, her inept nurturing skills, her camouflaged optimism, her loathing of self and low opinion of others, her awareness of the frailty of mortality, her despondency and sympathy for the sadness of others, her loving nature that we readers understand better than the people in her life that it is scarcely shown to, her reluctant hope that better is in store for her and she is deserving of this, her stubborn will to endure heartache and embrace the beauty of this world for however long she would be gifted to be a part of it. By the conclusion of the final stanza, the issues that initially distracted me from full immersion no longer mattered. I recognized that, whether in spite of or because of them, an excellent book deserving of its big prize had been written. As a fellow writer, I wonder about the process that led to these 13 interrelated, narratively discontinuous, non-chronological stories being packaged together. I would later learn that 6 of them were published in periodicals prior to publication of the book. So I'm guessing that the original plan was not to write a book, but once Strout found herself halfway there, it was decided to complete the process. In this way, I was reminded of my novella, Feeding the Squirrels, which began as me writing multiple unconnected scenes with the same protagonist. After several of them were done, I figured out a way to link the pieces together, transforming unrelated parts into chapters of a single work. I was also reminded of the novel I'm currently working on, since it is not written in chronological or any other type of order, and so the scenes can and may be rearranged by the time it reaches final draft stage. People who are supposedly experts try to tell writers that there are rules they must conform to, but the truth is there is no right or wrong way to construct a book. No simple description of what an author must accomplish to create a satisfying experience for readers, except for one, which is no simple feat to manufacture. We readers need to care, to give a damn. Count me among those who ended up happy to have made the acquaintance of Olive Kitteridge and others in her orbit. The way in which the characters and their stories were connected scarcely mattered. The lack of beginning, middle, end to individual stories or the work as a whole didn't matter. Elizabeth Strout made me give a damn. And that's what mattered. And that is what made this ultimately a very satisfying read in which I fully understood why it was decided to give it a Pulitzer Prize. After reading it, I did a little Googling. I like to do my research of a book after I read it in preparation for writing a review or filming a review, rather than doing it in advance of reading when I go in to read it for the I like to, be pretty fresh and not have too many preconceptions about it, and just, form my opinion of it as I go along, an opinion that sometimes shifts over time, such as what happened with this book. But in Googling afterwards, I discovered that there is a follow-up book written by Elizabeth Strout that is also about Olive Kitteridge and Crosby, Maine, and her friends and neighbors, and maybe it picks up from the end of her Pulitzer Prize winner. The final story in it, she meets a new man. Her husband of many years has passed away after having a stroke and being in a home for quite some time till he finally passes away. So Olive has been on her own for a while. She meets a new man, and it's sort of a romance, sort of a friendship, sort of just really a filling out process. And she ends up writing the guy off when she learns that he is a Republican who voted for George W. Bush, and she's the type of person who is just looking for a reason to cancel someone, to push them away from her. But by the very, very end, she is kind of waffling and thinking, well, maybe I should give this guy a chance after all. So in the second book, perhaps we pick up from there and see where that relationship goes, or perhaps not. The only way to find out is to read it, I guess, and perhaps I will do that. I also found out that HBO made a 4-part series out of Olive Kitteridge. I'm assuming, since I have not seen it yet anyway, that the series focuses on the stories that are specifically about Olive, and less so on the stories that are, just about other people that are in the town. I would think the show would be more tight and focused in that way. But who knows? Only way to find that out as well, and that's to check it out. I think I will eventually do that. I think that is everything that I have to say about Olive Kitteridge. I will now go edit my post at A Line a Day, which is my blog where I document all of the Pulitzer Prize winning books that I've read, and I can add this one to it. And then I'm going to get started on my next read, which is going to be Colored Television by Danzy Senna. I read a book by her several years ago, which I really enjoyed, so I'm looking forward to jumping into this one. Until the next time, this is Roy of Roy's Book Reviews, wishing you happy reading, and once again, for those of you who celebrate, Happy New Year.